The jade canopy of Zyronia's primeval forest stretched endlessly above, sunlight filtering through in scattered, dancing beams. Remnants of a forgotten war dotted the landscape, metal carcasses of vessels half swallowed by vines, crystalline spires cracked and dulled by centuries of neglect. This was a world caught between remembering and forgetting, where technology and nature battled for supremacy in silent, relentless combat. Jacob Mercer moved through the undergrowth with practiced stealth, his worn boots barely disturbing the carpet of phosphorescent moss beneath. At 42, the relic hunter's weathered face told stories of a life spent chasing treasures others had abandoned. His equipment was sparse but effective: a plasma cutter hanging from his belt, a biometric scanner strapped to his forearm, and a satchel of rations and medical supplies slung across his back. Most important was the ancient star chart tucked safely in his breast pocket, a map to potential fortune. "Another day in paradise," Jacob muttered to himself, wiping sweat from his brow. The jungle air hung heavy with moisture and the sweet rot scent of decaying vegetation. 3 days of searching had yielded nothing but rusted scrap and the constant harassment of Zyronia's less friendly inhabitants. Blood-sucking insects and territorial tree vipers that seemed to take personal offense at his presence. Still, Jacob persisted. Relic hunting was all he had known since leaving the Planetary Alliance forces 15 years ago. The solitude suited him. People asked too many questions, expected too much. Out here, surrounded by the chaotic harmony of jungle life, he answered to no one but himself. The scanner on his wrist pulsed faintly, detecting trace energy signatures ahead. Jacob adjusted his course, following the signal toward what appeared to be a massive fallen tree trunk, now serving as a natural bridge over a ravine. Such places often concealed valuable artifacts, protected from the elements and casual scavengers. He was halfway across the trunk when he heard it, faint but unmistakable amid the cacophony of howler apes and chittering insects. A child's sob. Jacob froze, his hand instinctively moving to the blaster, holstered at his hip. The sound came again, a pitiful whimper that seemed to rise from somewhere beneath the ravine's edge. He held his breath, listening intently. There shouldn't be any human settlements within 50 kilometers of this position. Colonial outposts kept to the established safe zones, away from the jungle's deeper reaches, where ancient defense systems still occasionally activated without warning. The crying continued, soft and broken. "Hello?" Jacob called out, immediately regretting it. If there were mercenaries nearby, always a risk in these parts, he'd just announced his position. But the crying, it didn't sound right. It carried an odd tonality, almost melodic despite the obvious distress. Carefully, Jacob moved to the edge of the log bridge and peered down. The ravine wasn't deep, perhaps 5 meters to a small clearing below. Thick ferns and luminescent fungi cushioned the ground, and at the center, partially hidden by a curtain of hanging vines, was a strange, pulsing light. The crying emanated from that light. Against every instinct for self-preservation, Jacob secured a line to the log and descended into the ravine. As he neared the bottom, the vines parted slightly in a gentle breeze, offering a clearer view of the source. It was a child, or at least, childlike. Tiny and huddled against the ravine wall, with skin the color of twilight purple, streaked with patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid silver. The creature's head was hairless, with graceful, elongated features and enormous, tear-filled eyes that reflected the light like twin moons. Around its neck hung a pendant that pulsed with soft blue luminescence, synchronized perfectly with its sobs. Jacob had encountered many species during his military service and subsequent years as a relic hunter, but nothing like this. The child, he was certain it was indeed a child, wore tattered garments of an unfamiliar material that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. "Hey there," he said softly, crouching a few meters away. "Are you hurt?" The child's head snapped up, those enormous eyes widening further in terror. It pressed itself harder against the ravine wall, the pendant at its throat pulsing more rapidly. "It's okay," Jacob said, holding up empty hands. "I won't hurt you." The child trembled violently, lips parting to reveal teeth like small pearls. "Rin, Rin," it whispered, the voice musical despite the obvious fear. "Rin, is that your name?" Jacob remained where he was, making no sudden movements. The child continued trembling but nodded once, barely perceptible. "I'm Jacob," he said, tapping his chest. "Jacob." He pointed gently toward the child. "Rin." "Yeah, Cobb," the child echoed, the unusual inflection making his name sound like a complex musical note. Only then did Jacob notice the injury, a deep gash along Rin's forearm, crusted with a substance that looked like dried quicksilver. The child was also painfully thin, ribs visible through the tattered clothing. Jacob slowly opened his satchel, telegraphing every movement. "I have medicine," he said, extracting a medical kit. "And food." He held up a nutrition bar, unwrapping it halfway. Rin's enormous eyes fixed on the food, a string of silvery drool escaping from one corner of her mouth. Her small hands, four-fingered with double-jointed thumbs, twitched forward before pulling back in hesitation. Jacob broke off a small piece of the bar and placed it on the ground between them, then retreated a step. Hunger eventually overcame fear. Rin darted forward with surprising speed, snatched the morsel, and retreated to her position against the wall. She sniffed the food cautiously before devouring it in a single bite. "Good, right?" Jacob smiled, breaking off another piece. This time, he held it out in his palm. The process repeated 4 more times, with Rin gradually growing bolder, until finally, she stood just an arm's length from Jacob, accepting food directly from his hand. Up close, he could see that what he'd taken for tribal markings on her skin were actually intricate, microscopic patterns, almost like circuitry, that pulsed faintly beneath her epidermis. "You're a long way from anywhere, aren't you?" Jacob murmured, more to himself than to Rin. "Let me see your arm now." Treating the wound proved surprisingly simple. Rin watched with solemn curiosity as Jacob cleaned the gash, applied antiseptic gel, and sealed it with a synthetic skin patch. She flinched once at the sting of the antiseptic, but made no sound of protest. "There," Jacob said, securing the last edge of the patch. "All better." Rin touched the bandage with wonder, then looked up at Jacob with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. Her free hand rose to touch the glowing pendant at her throat, and for a brief moment, the light within it flared brightly, illuminating the entire ravine in ethereal blue. Jacob's scanner suddenly shrieked to life, readings spiking off the charts. He glanced down at the display, brow furrowing. "That's impossible!" The scanner showed technological signatures scattered throughout the surrounding jungle, advanced energy patterns, similar to those emitted by Rin's pendant, but fainter, like echoes. And something else. Movement. Organized. Methodical sweeps that could only be search patterns. Someone was hunting through the jungle, hunting for Rin. "We need to move," Jacob said urgently, already packing away his supplies. "Now." Rin's expression showed she didn't understand his words, but his tone registered clearly. Her eyes darted to the top of the ravine, and she made a soft, frightened sound. Jacob didn't waste time with explanations. He hoisted his pack, then reached for Rin. She hesitated only briefly before allowing herself to be lifted. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, light as a bundle of hollow bones and gossamer. "Hold tight," he instructed, securing her against his chest with one arm while using the other to grasp the rope for their ascent. The climb was awkward, but manageable. Rin clung to him like a small primate, her thin arms wrapped around his neck with surprising strength. They had just reached the top when the first laser blast sizzled past Jacob's ear, scorching the bark of the log bridge. "Down!" Jacob commanded, dropping flat and pulling Rin beneath him. 3 more blasts followed in quick succession, impacting the fallen tree with enough force to send vibrations through Jacob's chest. He risked a glance in the direction of the attack. Through the dense foliage, he could make out armored figures moving with military precision. Mercenaries, 5 of them at least, equipped with top-grade scanning tech and weapons. Their armor bore no insignia, but the quality of their gear spoke volumes. This wasn't a random patrol. This was a well-funded retrieval operation. "Listen carefully," Jacob whispered to Rin, looking directly into those luminous eyes. "We run when I say run. Stay low. Stay quiet." He punctuated each instruction with simple hand gestures, hoping she would understand. Rin nodded solemnly. Jacob surveyed their options. The densest part of the jungle lay to their left, offering the best cover, but also the slowest progress. Directly ahead, the terrain sloped downward toward what his scanner indicated might be a water source. To the right, the land rose sharply, harder to traverse, but providing a tactical advantage if they could reach higher ground. A mercenary's voice crackled through the stillness. "Movement at the ravine. Signature matches the target." Jacob made his decision. "Run!" he hissed, springing up and dashing toward the dense jungle. Rin's hand clutched firmly in his. They plunged into the undergrowth as plasma fire erupted behind them, scorching leaves and igniting small fires that the humid air quickly smothered. Jacob zigzagged through the trees, counting on the dense vegetation to diffuse their heat signatures and confuse the mercenaries' tracking systems. Rin kept pace remarkably well for her size, her movements fluid and silent. They pushed deeper into the jungle, the light growing dimmer as the canopy thickened above. After 15 minutes of hard running, Jacob pulled them into the hollow of a massive tree root system. Both were breathing hard, though Rin's respiration had an odd, whistling quality to it. "I think we've got some distance," Jacob whispered, checking his scanner. The mercenaries' signals were still there, but fainter, spread out in a search pattern. "But they'll keep coming." Rin looked at him questioningly, then touched her pendant. The blue light pulsed once, twice, then projected a small, 3-dimensional map into the air between them. Jacob stared in amazement. The hologram showed their current position and, some distance away, a structure he'd never seen marked on any official Zyronian charts. A temple or shrine of some kind, nestled against a mountain face. "Is that where you're from?" Jacob asked, pointing to the structure. Rin shook her head, then pointed to the pendant, then to the temple. "The pendant belongs there?" Jacob guessed. Rin nodded vigorously, then touched the pendant again. The hologram expanded, showing energy signatures similar to the pendants scattered around the jungle. Faint, dormant, but present. Jacob's mind raced. Whatever Rin was, whatever that pendant contained, it was clearly connected to ancient technology scattered throughout Zyronia. Technology valuable enough to warrant a professional mercenary team. If they could reach this temple. His scanner beeped softly. The mercenaries were adjusting their search grid, moving closer. "Okay," Jacob whispered, making his decision. "We go to your temple." He pointed to the hologram, then to the jungle ahead of them. Together. Rin's face lit up with the first genuine smile he'd seen, transforming her alien features into something achingly vulnerable and young. She touched Jacob's hand lightly, her skin cool against his. Thus began their desperate journey through Zyronia's jungle, predator and prey, in a high-stakes game of survival. The temple, according to Rin's holographic map, lay 3 days' journey to the northeast, through increasingly difficult terrain. They would need to cross a river, navigate a network of ancient ruins, and traverse a notoriously dangerous region locals called the Whispering Marshes. Jacob set a punishing pace, stopping only when absolutely necessary for rest and sustenance. Rin never complained, though he could see the journey taking its toll on her small frame. Her skin, initially a vibrant purple, had dulled to a more muted hue, and the circuitry-like patterns beneath pulsed more slowly. They spoke little, developing a system of gestures and simple words. Jacob learned that Rin understood far more than she could express, her comprehension of his language growing hourly. She was a quick study, observing his survival techniques with keen interest, and even showing him more efficient ways to identify edible plants specific to Xyronia. The mercenaries remained a constant shadow, never quite catching up but never falling far behind. Jacob changed directions frequently, used streams to mask their trail, and employed every evasion tactic from his military days. Still, the hunters persisted with disturbing determination. On the evening of the second day, as they huddled in the shelter of a rock outcropping, Jacob finally asked the question that had been haunting him. "Why are they hunting you, Rin?" Rin looked at him solemnly, touched her pendant, then spread her hands to encompass the entire jungle. "Memory," she said, the word careful and practiced. "I carry memory." Before Jacob could press further, his scanner gave a proximity alert. He silenced it quickly, peering into the gathering darkness. The mercenaries had split up, with two of them now dangerously close to their position. "We need to move," he whispered. But it was too late. A beam of light cut through the gloom, sweeping over their hiding place. A gruff voice called out, "Contact! Section 7!" Jacob acted instinctively, pushing Rin behind him and drawing his blaster. The first mercenary emerged from the undergrowth, weapon raised. Jacob fired twice, catching the man in the shoulder and sending him sprawling backward. "Run!" Jacob shouted to Rin, firing again to provide cover. They fled deeper into the jungle as night fell completely, the darkness both ally and enemy. Guided only by the faint glow of Rin's pendant and the occasional bioluminescent plant, they stumbled through the underbrush. Behind them, shouts and the crash of pursuit grew steadily louder. A plasma bolt sizzled past, so close Jacob felt its heat against his cheek. Another struck a tree beside them, showering them with burning splinters. Rin stumbled, crying out as a fragment embedded itself in her leg. Jacob scooped her up without breaking stride, cradling her against his chest as he had in the ravine. Her pendant flared in response, momentarily illuminating their surroundings and revealing a narrow crevice in the rock face ahead, barely visible behind a curtain of vines. Without hesitation, Jacob plunged through the vines and into the crevice. It widened immediately into a tunnel, the walls smooth and unnaturally regular. This was no natural formation but a constructed passage, its surfaces inscribed with the same circuitry-like patterns that marked Rin's skin. The tunnel sloped downward, leading them deeper underground. Jacob activated the light on his scanner, revealing a passageway that stretched beyond its illumination. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded, then disappeared entirely. "I think we lost them," Jacob whispered, setting Rin down gently. "Let me see your leg." The injury wasn't severe, a small piece of wood that Jacob removed easily. Rin watched with that same solemn curiosity as he applied another synthetic skin patch. "Where are we?" Jacob asked, gesturing to the tunnel around them. Rin touched the wall, her fingers tracing the patterns etched into its surface. The markings glowed faintly at her touch. "Old way," she said. "To Moon Temple." "Moon Temple? Is that where we're going?" Rin nodded, pointing deeper into the tunnel. "Safe there. For pendant. For me." Jacob checked his scanner, but the readings were confused, disrupted by whatever material composed the tunnel walls. "Are there more tunnels like this?" "Many," Rin confirmed. "All forgotten." She made a sweeping gesture with her hand. "War made forget." The implications staggered Jacob. An entire network of ancient tunnels, undetected by modern scanning technology, running beneath Xyronia's surface. The archaeological value alone was incalculable, to say nothing of the potential technological discoveries. But more pressing matters demanded attention. Jacob checked their supplies. 2 days of rations remaining, half a canteen of water, and a medical kit running low on essentials. His blaster showed a charge at 60%. Not ideal for a prolonged journey or confrontation. How far to the Moon Temple through this tunnel? Rin considered, then held up her hand with fingers spread. 5 sleeps. 5 days, Jacob frowned. According to the holographic map, they had been less than a day's journey from the temple through the jungle. That's longer than going above ground. Safer, Rin insisted. Hunters cannot follow. That was a compelling argument. Jacob weighed their options, finally nodding in agreement. All right, we go through the tunnel, but we'll need to find water along the way. Rin smiled, pointing to faint moisture glistening on the tunnel wall. Water comes. Soon, river underground. Their journey through the tunnel system proved both easier and more challenging than the jungle trek. They were safe from mercenary pursuit and the jungle's many predators, but the tunnels were a maze of intersections and dead ends. Without Rin's seemingly innate knowledge of the patterns etched into the walls, they would have been hopelessly lost within hours. As promised, they eventually came to an underground river, crystal clear and cool, flowing through a vast cavern whose ceiling was studded with luminescent crystals that cast the entire space in soft, bluish light. Schools of blind, pale fish darted through the water, and fungal growths along the banks provided unexpected nourishment when Rin demonstrated which were edible. They followed the river's course for 2 days, sleeping in small alcoves and bathing in the clean water. Rin grew stronger with each passing hour, her skin regaining its vibrant hue, and the patterns beneath flowing more vigorously. She also became more talkative, her grasp of Jacob's language improving dramatically. On the 3rd night, as they sat beside a small fire of dried fungus that burned without smoke, Rin finally told her story, or as much of it as she could express with her limited vocabulary. My people, she began, gesturing upward, beyond the cavern ceiling to the stars above, came here long before, built, she struggled for the word, cities, temples, lived with forest. She touched the patterns on her skin. We connected to all life. You're not from Zyronia originally? Jacob asked. Rin shook her head. Stars, she said simply. We came from stars. An extraterrestrial origin wasn't surprising. Many species in the known galaxy had spread far from their homeworlds. What was surprising was the antiquity Rin described. According to official records, Zyronia had been discovered and colonized less than 2 centuries ago. Then came others, Rin continued, her expression darkening. Wanted our knowing. She tapped her pendant. Our memory. Great war. Many died. She made a sweeping gesture. All died. Except... Except what? Jacob prompted gently. Memory holders, Rin said, touching her pendant again. Children chosen to carry. She struggled again with the concept. Soul of people. Hidden. Protected. Her eyes grew sad. I was asleep. Long sleep. Until ship fell from sky, broke open mountain. I woke, but alone. Others still sleep. Jacob's mind reeled with implications. Rin wasn't simply a lost child. She was a repository of an entire civilization's knowledge and culture, preserved somehow in that pendant, and, perhaps, in her very DNA. The patterns on her skin, the matching etchings in the tunnels, they were more than decorative. They were data, history, science beyond current understanding. No wonder mercenaries were hunting her. The technological value alone would be worth fortunes, to say nothing of the military applications. And the Moon Temple, he asked. What's there? Gateway, Rin said simply. To Heart City, where others sleep, where I belong. The 4th day in the tunnels brought them to a massive underground chamber, where the river plunged into an abyss, creating a thunderous waterfall that disappeared into darkness. The only way forward was a narrow stone bridge, ancient but intact, spanning the chasm. "We cross," Rin said confidently, already stepping onto the bridge. Jacob followed more cautiously, testing each section before committing his weight. The bridge held firm, despite its apparent age. Halfway across, Rin suddenly froze, her head tilting as though listening. "What is it?" Jacob asked, instantly alert. "Hunters," Rin whispered, pointing back the way they had come. "Found tunnel." Jacob strained his ears but heard nothing above the waterfall's roar. Yet he trusted Rin's senses. They had proven superior to his own on multiple occasions. "How? You said they couldn't follow us." "Not follow," Rin corrected. "Found another way in. Old maps, maybe?" She pointed urgently to the far side of the bridge. "Must hurry." They quickened their pace, reaching the far side just as Jacob's scanner finally detected movement behind them. The mercenaries had indeed found another entrance to the tunnel system and were converging on their position rapidly. Beyond the bridge, the tunnel continued its gentle ascent, growing wider and more elaborate. The etchings on the walls became more pronounced, occasionally interrupted by alcoves containing deteriorated artifacts, remnants of Rin's people's technology. Under different circumstances, Jacob would have stopped to examine them, but the approaching threat allowed no such luxury. The tunnel eventually opened into a colossal cavern, so vast that the beam from Jacob's scanner couldn't reach its ceiling or far walls. Stalagmites and stalactites created a forest of stone, interspersed with the ruins of what had once been an underground city. Buildings carved directly from the living rock stood in silent testimony to a civilization long vanished. "Heart City?" Jacob asked in awe. Rin shook her head. "Gate City. Before Heart City." She pointed to the far end of the cavern, where a structure more intact than the others stood bathed in a shaft of natural light from an opening far above. "Moon Temple there." They picked their way through the stone forest and ruined buildings, Rin leading with increasing urgency. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew steadily louder. Boots on stone, voices calling commands, the distinctive hum of energy weapons charging. The temple rose before them, a pyramidal structure of gleaming black stone that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. Its entrance was a massive doorway, twice Jacob's height, sealed by what appeared to be a solid stone slab carved with concentric circles and the now familiar circuitry patterns. Rin approached the door, her pendant glowing intensely. She placed her small palm against the central circle, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then a vibration ran through the ground beneath their feet, and the patterns on the door illuminated, glowing with the same blue light as Rin's pendant. A grinding sound echoed through the cavern as the stone slab began to retract into the floor, agonizingly slowly. "They're coming," Jacob warned, checking his scanner. The mercenaries had reached the edge of the ruined city and were spreading out, advancing cautiously but steadily. The door was only halfway open when the first plasma bolt struck the temple's exterior, sending chips of stone flying. Jacob pulled Rin behind a fallen column, returning fire with his blaster. 3 mercenaries had taken positions among the stalagmites, using the stone formations as cover while they laid down suppressing fire. "Stay down," Jacob instructed Rin, continuing to fire strategically, forcing the mercenaries to keep their heads down. But his blaster's charge was depleting rapidly, and he counted at least 5 attackers now visible among the ruins. A voice called out from behind the stalagmites. "Surrender the alien and the artifact. Hunter, there's a bounty on them, not on you. Walk away with your life." "Generous offer," Jacob shouted back. "But I'll pass." He fired again, striking a mercenary who had ventured too far from cover. The man went down with a cry, clutching his leg. The temple door continued its glacial ascent, revealing darkness beyond. Rin tugged at Jacob's sleeve, pointing urgently. "Almost open. Must go inside." As soon as it's wide enough, Jacob agreed, firing again to keep the mercenaries pinned down. A new sound cut through the firefight, a low, ominous rumble that seemed to emanate from the temple itself. The ground trembled beneath them, and dust rained from the cavern ceiling. Rin's eyes widened. "Temple wakes," she whispered, both awe and fear in her voice. The door finally opened enough for them to slip through. Jacob provided one last burst of covering fire, then grabbed Rin's hand. "Now!" They dashed for the opening, plasma bolts sizzling around them. One grazed Jacob's shoulder, searing through his jacket and scorching the skin beneath. He stumbled, but kept moving, pushing Rin ahead of him through the doorway and following close behind. Inside, absolute darkness greeted them, a void so complete it seemed to have physical weight. Then, Rin's pendant flared brilliantly, illuminating a vast circular chamber. At its center stood a pedestal, and upon that pedestal, a depression that perfectly matched the shape of Rin's pendant. "There," Rin said, pointing. "Pendant goes there." The rumbling grew louder, and the temple shook more violently. Outside, shouts of alarm from the mercenaries suggested something unexpected was happening. "What's going on?" Jacob demanded, steadying himself against a wall as the shaking intensified. "Temple defends," Rin explained, moving toward the pedestal. "Old Guardian's wake." A scream from outside confirmed her words. Jacob risked a glance back through the doorway and witnessed an astonishing sight. The stone floor of the cavern was moving, cracking, shifting, rising. What he had taken for natural formations and ruins were transforming, reconfiguring into massive, root-like appendages that swept through the mercenaries' positions, grabbing men and equipment alike. "What the hell?" Jacob breathed. "Forest guardians," Rin said, now standing before the pedestal. "Connected to temple. Connected to me." She removed the pendant from around her neck, holding it reverently above the depression in the pedestal. "I must complete memory journey." Outside, chaos reigned. The root creatures, some kind of sentient plant life or biomechanical construct, had captured 3 of the mercenaries. The remaining 2 retreated, firing desperately at the writhing appendages pursuing them. "Wait," Jacob said, catching Rin's arm before she could place the pendant. "What happens when you complete this memory journey?" Rin looked up at him, those enormous eyes reflecting the pendant's glow. "Door opens to Heart City, where others sleep, where I belong." She hesitated, seeming to sense his concern. "Jacob can come too. Safe there." Before Jacob could respond, a new threat emerged. One of the mercenaries had evaded the root guardians and now stood in the temple doorway, weapon raised. It was their leader, a tall, scarred woman whose armor bore more battle damage than the others. "Don't move," she commanded, her blaster trained on Rin. "Put the artifact down, child." Jacob raised his own weapon, but a quick glance at the charge indicator confirmed his fear. The power cell was depleted. He positioned himself between Rin and the mercenary anyway. "It's over," he said firmly. "Your team is gone. The temple defenses will get you too." The mercenary leader smiled coldly. "My employers prepared me for this contingency." She raised her free hand, displaying a small device emitting a high-pitched whine. "Ancient frequency disruptor. Your plant monsters are already retreating." Indeed, the sounds of chaos outside had diminished, the rumbling subsiding to a low vibration. "Now," the mercenary continued, "the artifact. Hand it over, and you both walk away." Jacob felt Rin move behind him, her small hand pressing something into his. When he glanced down, he saw she had given him the pendant. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "Trust," Rin whispered back. Then, louder, she called to the mercenary. "You want pendant? Come take—" The mercenary narrowed her eyes suspiciously, but took a step forward. Then another. The disruptor held before her like a shield, her blaster never wavering from Jacob's chest. Jacob held his ground. the pendant concealed in his palm. Rin stood slightly behind him, her posture tense but determined. "That's far enough," the mercenary said when she was about 3 meters away. "Toss it here." "First, tell me who you work for," Jacob demanded. "Who wants this technology so badly?" The mercenary laughed. "Everyone, Hunter. Every megacorp, every military, every collector of antiquities. But today, I'm working for Helix Industries." She gestured impatiently with her blaster. "The pendant. Now." Jacob had heard of Helix, a biotechnology conglomerate known for pushing ethical boundaries in pursuit of profit. If they got their hands on Rin's people's technology? "I don't think so," Jacob said, closing his fist around the pendant. What happened next occurred in a blur of motion and light. Rin darted out from behind Jacob, moving with that surprising speed she demonstrated in their flight through the jungle. The mercenary fired, but Rin was already rolling beneath the plasma bolt, coming up directly beneath the woman's guard. Before the mercenary could adjust her aim, Rin placed both hands on the floor and closed her eyes. The circuitry patterns on her skin flared brilliantly, and the same patterns etched into the temple floor responded in kind, creating a network of blue light that raced across the stone and up the walls. The temple shuddered violently, and a section of the floor beneath the mercenary suddenly reconfigured, dropping away to create a pit. The woman cried out, losing her balance and falling backward, her weapons clattering away as she scrambled for purchase on the edge of the newly formed hole. Jacob rushed forward, pendant still clutched in his hand, and kicked the frequency disruptor into the pit. It shattered on impact with the bottom, some 10 meters below. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The rumbling resumed, louder than before, and the root guardians surged back into activity outside the temple. Screams indicated they had found the remaining mercenaries. The mercenary leader hung from the edge of the pit, her fingers gradually losing their grip on the smooth stone. Despite everything, Jacob found himself reaching for her. "Take my hand," he offered. The woman looked up at him with a mixture of surprise and contempt. Then her expression shifted to horror as she looked past him. "Behind you!" Jacob instinctively ducked and spun around. One of the root guardians had entered the temple, a massive tendril of living wood and glowing sap, thick as a tree trunk and topped with what appeared to be sensory organs resembling flowers. It undulated toward them, radiating an aura of ancient power and implacable purpose. Rin stepped forward, fearless, and placed her palm against the tendril. The patterns on her skin synchronized with similar markings on the guardian's surface. "She is Memory Keeper," Rin said, speaking to the guardian in a language Jacob had never heard. Yet somehow, he understood the meaning. "She carries the torch of remembrance. She is to be protected, not harmed." The guardian paused, its flower-like sensors opening wider, exuding a luminescent pollen that drifted around Rin. After a tense moment, the tendril curled protectively around the small alien child, then extended another appendage toward the mercenary still hanging from the pit's edge. "No," Rin commanded, again in that strange language. "No more death. Enough have died for memory." The guardian hesitated, then withdrew the threatening appendage. Behind them, the mercenary pulled herself up over the edge of the pit and collapsed, breathing heavily. "Get out," Jacob told her, retrieving her fallen blaster and training it on her. "Tell Helix and anyone else listening, this place is protected. The technology isn't for sale or theft." The mercenary looked from Jacob to Rin to the hovering guardian, then nodded once. She rose unsteadily to her feet and backed toward the door. "This isn't over," she warned. "Others will come." "They'll meet the same reception," Jacob replied. "Go." When the mercenary had disappeared through the doorway, Jacob turned to Rin. "That was impressive. How did you know you could control the temple's defenses?" "Not control," Rin corrected. "Ask. I am connected." She held out her hand for the pendant. Now we must open way to Heart City. Jacob returned the pendant, watching as Rin approached the pedestal once more. This time, she placed the glowing artifact into the depression without hesitation. It fit perfectly, locking into place with a soft click. The effect was transformative. The pendant's light intensified 100-fold, sending beams radiating across the chamber that activated previously invisible patterns on every surface. The entire temple hummed with energy, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. The Root Guardian retreated respectfully to the edge of the chamber as the back wall of the temple began to reconfigure. Stone flowed like liquid, revealing a hidden passageway bathed in the same blue light that emanated from the pendant. "Heart City," Rin breathed, her voice filled with emotion. "Home." Jacob stared into the passageway, both awed and suddenly melancholy. Their journey was ending. Rin would return to her people, or what remained of them, and he would go back to his solitary existence as a relic hunter. The realization left an unexpected hollow feeling in his chest. "Will your people be there?" he asked softly. "You said they were sleeping." "Yes, in dream chambers, waiting for Memory Torch to wake them." Rin looked up at him, those luminous eyes searching his face. "Jacob comes too?" The question caught him off guard. "Me? I don't belong there." "Helped Rin," she said simply. "Saved memory. Protected journey." She took his hand in both of hers. "Jacob is friend. Friends welcome in Heart City." Before Jacob could respond, the Root Guardian suddenly tensed, its sensory flowers turning toward the temple entrance. Outside, the sounds of energy weapons and shouted commands indicated that reinforcements had arrived. Likely, a second mercenary team called by the leader when she realized what they were facing. "They're persistent," Jacob muttered, checking the charge on the mercenary's blaster he'd confiscated. It showed a healthy 80%. Rin's expression grew urgent. "Must go now. Close way behind." She pointed to a crystalline control panel that had emerged beside the newly opened passage. "This seals door. Keeps Heart City safe." Jacob nodded. Decision made. "Let's go." Together, they approached the passage, the Root Guardian following protectively. As they reached the threshold, Rin manipulated the control panel. The stone door began to descend, sealing off the passage to Heart City. Through the narrowing gap, Jacob caught a final glimpse of the temple chamber. Mercenaries had breached the entrance, only to be met by a host of Root Guardians that surged forward to defend the sacred space. The last image before the door sealed completely was of the mercenaries retreating in disarray, pursued by the ancient defenders. Then they were alone in the passage, illuminated only by the blue glow of patterns on the walls and Rin's skin. The pathway sloped gently upward, leading them through the mountain's heart. "How far to Heart City?" Jacob asked as they walked. "Not far," Rin assured him. "Path goes up to surface. City and hidden valley beyond mountain." They emerged from the passage as dawn broke over Xironia. The jungle spread out below them in a verdant tapestry, glistening with morning dew. The exit opened onto a narrow ledge high on the mountainside, offering a breathtaking panorama of the wilderness they had traversed. "Beautiful," Rin whispered, her eyes reflecting the sunrise. "Yes," Jacob agreed. "Worth fighting for." A path wound down from their position into a secluded valley invisible from below. A perfect natural fortress, protected by steep mountain walls on all sides. And there, nestled in the valley's center, stood Heart City. Unlike the ruins they had passed through, this city was remarkably preserved, a collection of graceful spires and domes that seemed to grow organically from the valley floor. The architecture blended seamlessly with the surrounding vegetation, as though buildings and plants had evolved together in perfect symbiosis. "Home," Rin said simply, her voice filled with wonder and relief. They descended the path, the Root Guardian following like a faithful companion. As they neared the city's outskirts, Jacob noticed that the buildings were not merely preserved. They were alive. The same circuitry patterns that marked Rin's skin adorned every structure, pulsing with dormant energy waiting to be awakened. At the city's center stood the largest structure, a massive dome surrounded by 7 spires, each topped with a crystal that caught the morning light and refracted it in prismatic displays. "Dream chambers there," Rin explained, pointing to the central dome. "Where others sleep." "How many?" Jacob asked. 307, Rin replied precisely. "Children like me, memory keepers." The implications staggered Jacob. Not just Rin, but hundreds like her, each preserving some crucial aspect of their civilization's knowledge and culture. If awakened, they could revolutionize current understanding of technology, biology, perhaps even physics itself. No wonder mercenary companies and corporations were willing to commit resources to hunting them. The potential value was incalculable. They approached the central dome, its entrance responding to Rin's presence by reconfiguring, much as the temple door had done. Inside, the space opened into a vast chamber filled with translucent pods, arranged in concentric circles. Each pod contained a child similar to Rin, suspended in some form of stasis, their skin showing the same circuitry patterns, though dormant and faded. At the chamber's center stood a pedestal, identical to the one in the Moon Temple. Rin approached it reverently, her movements now imbued with ceremonial precision. "What happens now?" Jacob asked softly, feeling like an intruder in this sacred space. "Awakening," Rin said. "Memory torchlights others. City lives again." She hesitated, looking back at Jacob with an expression that seemed almost apologetic. "Takes time. Many days." "I understand," Jacob nodded, already preparing himself for farewell. "You have your people to tend to." Rin's face clouded with confusion. "Jacob not staying?" The question caught him off guard. I assumed once your people awakened, you wouldn't need me anymore." Rin stepped away from the pedestal and took Jacob's hand, leading him to one of the stasis pods. Inside, a childlike figure floated peacefully, this one with skin the color of burnished gold, rather than Rin's purple. "Look," Rin instructed, placing her palm against the pod's surface. The circuitry patterns within the gold-skinned child brightened momentarily in response. "Each keeps different memory. This one," she indicated the pod, "keeps star knowledge. That one," she pointed to another, "keeps healing arts. Another keeps growing secrets." She touched her own chest. "I keep history, stories, connection." "I'm not sure I understand," Jacob admitted. "Need all memories to be whole," Rin explained patiently. "Need different kinds to make life complete." Her expression grew earnest. "Jacob has memories too. Different memories. Valuable." The realization dawned slowly. "You want me to stay? To help rebuild?" "Yes." Rin's eyes shone with hope. "Stay. Share memories. Learn ours. Teach yours." She gestured to the sleeping children. "They wake soon. Need friend like Jacob showed Rin." Jacob looked around the chamber, then out through the dome's translucent walls to the city beyond. For 15 years, he had wandered Zyronia's wilderness, searching for relics of a past he didn't understand, finding value only in what he could sell. He had been alone by choice, telling himself it was simpler that way. But here was something different, a chance to be part of something meaningful, to help preserve knowledge rather than exploit it, to connect rather than isolate. "The mercenaries will keep coming," he warned. "Others too, once word gets out about this place." "City has defenses," Rin assured him. "Better than Temple. And Jacob knows Hunter's ways. Can help protect." She was right about that. His experience with mercenary tactics would be valuable in establishing security protocols. And truthfully, the prospect of remaining here, learning from an ancient civilization while helping to protect it from exploitation, appealed to him far more than returning to his former life. "All right," Jacob said finally. "I'll stay, for a while, at least." Rin's face lit up with joy, the patterns on her skin pulsing brightly. She squeezed his hand, then turned back to the central pedestal. "Now, awakening begins." She placed her hand on the pedestal, and her pendant, still installed in the Moon Temple's control system, activated remotely. The circuitry patterns throughout the city flared to life, energy flowing in waves from building to building, through the ground beneath their feet, into the stasis chamber and the sleeping children within. One by one, the pods began to glow more intensely, the patterns on the sleeper's skin brightening from dormant ember to vibrant flame. It would take time, as Rin had said, but the process had begun. Heart City was awakening. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher over Zyronia's jungle. Inside the dome, Jacob Mercer, no longer just a relic hunter, stood beside a small alien child with twilight purple skin, watching the future unfold before them, hand in tiny hand. The end of one journey, the beginning of another. The first child awoke 3 days later, the golden-skinned keeper of star knowledge Rin had shown Jacob. Others followed in quick succession, each emerging from stasis wide-eyed and curious, speaking the same melodic language Rin had used with the Root Guardian. Rin moved among them like a caretaker, far older than her apparent years, explaining, reassuring, teaching them the rudiments of human language as Jacob had taught her. The awakened children accepted Jacob's presence with the same openness Rin had shown, curious about this tall stranger from beyond their city. Meanwhile, Jacob established a security perimeter with the help of the Root Guardians, who proved more intelligent and trainable than he had initially realized. He set up early warning systems using salvaged equipment from the mercenaries' abandoned gear, established patrol routes, and began training the first awakened children in basic defensive tactics. 1 month after their arrival at Heart City, Jacob stood with Rin on the mountain ledge where they had first emerged, watching the sunset paint Zyronia's jungle in hues of gold and crimson. In the valley below, Heart City glowed with renewed life, spires illuminated from within, gardens flourishing under the care of the plant keepers among Rin's people. "Beautiful," Rin said, echoing her words from their first morning. "Yes," Jacob agreed, "and worth protecting." Rin looked up at him, her expression serene yet determined. "Many journeys still to come." Jacob nodded, understanding her meaning. This was just the beginning. The mercenaries would return eventually, with greater numbers and better preparation. Beyond them loomed larger threats: corporations, governments, military powers, all of whom would covet the knowledge Heart City contained. But for now, in this moment, they had achieved something remarkable. A lost child had found her way home, an ancient city had awakened from slumber, and a solitary hunter had discovered a purpose greater than himself. Jacob placed his hand on Rin's shoulder, feeling the now familiar cool touch of her skin and the gentle pulse of the living circuitry beneath. Together, they watched darkness settle over the jungle as the first stars appeared in Zyronia's sky, tiny points of light from distant worlds, some perhaps waiting for their own memories to return home.